Good morning, everyone. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. Thank you, Matt, for that very generous introduction. I want to thank the Legal Services Corporation for putting together this tremendous forum, for the work that you have been doing and will continue to do on behalf of veterans and so many others. I want to thank all of you, distinguished members of the bar, for your presence. Certainly thank you, Abdil, for your service and for that very poignant message that you delivered. It's an honor and a privilege to be here back at NYU Law School, where, as was mentioned, I graduated just a few short years ago. But every time I'm here at NYU, I tell you, I can't help but getting flashbacks to first-year civil procedure. That Socratic method somehow stays with you all these years later. But I appreciate the training that I was able to receive here at the law school. Dean Morrison's doing a tremendous job continuing the work of Dean Sexton. But honored to be part of those who can call ourselves lawyers in the great tradition of so many others throughout the nation and indeed the world. I appreciate the work that you're doing on behalf of veterans throughout the year. Appreciate the work that you do on behalf of the poor and the sick and the afflicted and working class folks, the least, the lost, the left behind. Appreciate the work that you do on behalf of disenfranchised communities or individuals, particularly those who have worn the uniform and who have served in such a phenomenal way, sacrificed in a way that is profound and is at the heart and soul of who we are as a nation. Now, I know that there's still one last panel to get to, so I'm going to try to follow the advice of a former Sunday school teacher of mine on the question of public speaking, who once said to me, "Jeffries, be brief, be bright, and be gone." And so let me just simply say, you know, my father, who just turned 81 last month, served in the Air Force, a Cold War veteran in Germany during the height of the conflict, the Cold War between the United States and Russia, then the Soviet Union. I appreciate, of course, him and his service, appreciate the service and sacrifice of the millions of veterans from throughout this country, particularly those who wore the uniform in the midst of an active conflict, in a way where they were at risk of paying the ultimate sacrifice, and many did, so that they could defend freedom and democracy at home. And it's all of our responsibilities, those of us who have the privilege to serve in Congress, but every single American has the responsibility to make sure that those veterans, when they complete their active duty, when they come back home from theaters of conflict, that they have access to the health care and to the affordable housing opportunities and to the benefits that they have earned and to jobs that will allow them to provide for the well-being of themselves and their families and to economic opportunity. And so I appreciate the work that you do in that regard. The United States, of course, is the wealthiest country in the history of the world and the most powerful nation on earth. But I don't think that you can judge the greatness of a country by its military power or by its economic might. You should judge the greatness of a country by how it treats the least, the lost, the left behind, and those who have worn the uniform to defend all that America is and hopefully will continue to be as we move forward as the leader of the free world. And we can't take that for granted. This is why we should appreciate so much what veterans have done for us in defense of freedom and liberty and democracy. The Founding Fathers understood that democracy was not a self-executing proposition, that it wouldn't simply run on autopilot, that it would require service and sacrifice to country and to nation. putting people above party affiliation. They understood democracy wasn't a self-executing proposition. The story is famously told, of course, of that moment in September of 1787 when the Founding Fathers completed their work. And at that convention hall in Philadelphia, Ben Franklin emerges, and he's approached by a woman named Elizabeth Powell. Elizabeth Powell at the time was a prominent civic activist, distinguished member of society, close friend of George Washington. She approached Ben Franklin outside of that convention hall. Some of you may be familiar with the story, and said, "Dr. Franklin, what have you gentlemen done? Have you created a monarchy or a republic?" Dr. Franklin, of course, famously paused and said, "Mrs. Powell, we've created a republic if you can keep it." And what do we think Dr. Franklin was saying? Well, of course, the system of government that had been construed, anchored in principles like the rule of law, checks and balances, separate and co-equal branches of government, the independent judiciary, the free and fair press. Never before in the history of the world had such a collection of values, ideas, and institutions been put together in one form of government. And so I believe that Dr. Franklin and others were unclear as to whether the great democratic experiment could be sustained. But the majesty of America is that year after year, decade after decade, century after century, through some very difficult and turbulent times, American exceptionalism has kept this democracy thing going, in no small part due to the service and sacrifice of those who have worn the uniform in conflict after conflict after conflict, eventually allowing us to emerge as the leader of the free world. But the question remains, at this particular moment, in these challenging and turbulent times, where some might reasonably conclude that all of these values, all of these ideas, all of these institutions at this moment in time are at risk. Not necessarily from what is happening outside of the United States, but what is happening here. Whether this great American experiment anchored in the rule of law and democracy, protected by those who have worn the uniform, whether it can sustain itself moving forward. Mrs. Powell, we've created a republic if you can keep it. And that republic that was created, we know that the founders, they didn't want a monarchy, they didn't want a dictator, they didn't want a king, they wanted a democracy. And in many ways, the two pillars of that democracy, those who fought abroad to protect our freedom and democracy at home, who've worn the uniform, and the rule of law as a nation, not of men, but of laws. And so in many ways, what you are doing, the LSC and the distinguished men and women of the bar who are here today and who you represent, are combining what has sustained America all the way through in defense of those who have defended our democracy, using the vehicle of the laws that you were trained to uphold. And so I just thank you for what you are doing for the veterans of this city and our great country. Thank you for what you are doing to defend the principle of liberty and justice for all. Thankful for what you are doing to defend the principle of equal protection under the law, and thankful for what you are doing to defend our democracy and the rule of law and the men and women who have sacrificed to keep this democracy thing and this democratic republic going. So God bless you, God bless the veterans, and God bless the United States of America.